Today, we are delighted to have Ms. Naila Koilo as chairperson for today's panel discussion. Ms. Naila is an educationist gifted with a high degree of sensitivity. She is the founder secretary of Paryavarani, worked on conservation issues whose efforts were recognized by the government of Karnataka with the Parisara Mitra Award in 2011. She has authored 2 books based on field research in curriculum development and integrated farming-centered pedagogy for schools. Ms. Naila, Montfortians are pleased to have you as a chairperson for today's panel discussion. A warm welcome to you, ma'am. We are thrilled to be joined by an esteemed group of panel members. Today, we have an international panel member in our midst. I deem it an honor to introduce Dr. Miriam Villela. Dr. Miriam Villela is the Executive Director of the Earth Charter International Secretariat and the Center for Education for Sustainable Development at UPs. She coordinates the UNESCO Chair on Education for Sustainable Development with the Earth Charter. Dr. Miriam worked for the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development. Ms. Miriam holds a PhD in education. On behalf of Montfort family, I extend a hearty welcome to you, Dr. Miriam. I am pleased to introduce our distinguished panel member, Ms. Usha Rao. Ms. Usha Rao did her schooling in Maharashtra and worked with the NGOs in Karnataka, Telangana, and Madhya Pradesh for about 15 years. In Madhya Pradesh, the contact with the people's struggles seeded the shift to working with the land. For the last 2 decades, she has been deeply involved in permaculture. A warm welcome to Ms. Usha Rao. I deem it an honor to introduce our next panel member, Mr. N.S. Prasad, carbon and energy calculation expert. Mr. N.S. Prasad is a board member, regional coordinator, and a program manager of IYCN projects at Hyderabad chapter. He was selected for IVLP, International Visitors Program, one of the most prestigious programs offered by the government of the United States of America on climate change and clean energy. He was also involved in developing comprehensive carbon footprint calculator as per Indian standards with the Serena Foundation. A hearty welcome to you today's panel discussion, sir. I'm really happy to be introducing young and dynamic panel member for today's discussions, Ms. Ridhima Pandey, school student and litigant on climate crisis. Ms. Ridhima Pandey is an environmental activist from Uttarakhand who advocates for action against climate change. In the very first case of its kind in India, Ridhima Pandey, when she was 9 years old, has moved the National Green Tribunal alleging inaction on the part of the government to take measures for climate change adoption and mitigation. She also was one of the complainants to the United Nations in action against the climate crisis. Ms. Ridhima, we are all waiting to hear your views and practical ideas on climate crisis towards a Montfortian response. Montfortian family is pleased to welcome you, Ms. Ridhima. I just like to remind audience to read more about the distinguished panel members and understand the contributions they have made. Kindly take a look into the brochure. May I now request Ms. Naila to start the panel discussion. Over to Ms. Naila.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Good morning to everyone, and I'm so happy to be here and welcoming everyone and chairing this session. So since we are addressing the school teachers and institutions from schools, my task is more or less that of a class monitor. You know, I just have to be there around and see that everyone is, keeping to whatever is the confirmed protocol for schools and classrooms. So one is Miriam is taking time off from family, and it's late for her. So without too many of introductory remarks from my side, we will begin with Miriam, and then we will take Ridhima. And Miriam will immediately after her presentation, she will take questions. So also with Ridhima, she will also after her presentations take questions, and then we will take Prasad, and then we can go on to Usha, and we can then carry on with questions and discussions till the end of the session. So Miriam, welcome to the session. Please start your presentations.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for the invitation. Good morning and good evening. I send you greetings from Costa Rica, where I am. And I'm really honored and happy to be here and get to know you all. I'm originally from Brazil, from Brasilia, but I have been living here in Costa Rica for over 26 years, working with the Earth Charter Initiative. I'm gonna share presentation and let me know if you can see. Can you see it? I suppose so. Yes. Okay, I'll briefly present to you how the Earth Charter has been used or brought to education for sustainable development and education for global citizenship. So I'll try to briefly share with you, give you the context on how to bring values and principles of sustainability and global citizenship to education through the lenses of the Earth Charter. And of course, I'm going to share a little bit of what is the Earth Charter all about. And again, I'm speaking with you from the Earth Charter International, the University for Peace, and the work we do under the framework of the UNESCO Chair on Education for Sustainable Development with the Earth Charter. And this is our education center that is located here in Costa Rica. Hopefully one day, any one of you could come and visit us. So the focus of our work over the past 15 years or more has been on that intersection between sustainability, what is sustainability, what the values and principles of sustainability are, and what the relationship of the values and principles of sustainability with the sense of the concept of global citizenship, and how to bring that into education. Therefore, our UNESCO chair and the work we have been doing is focused in that intersection between sustainability, global citizenship, values, and education. And with that, we have been doing research and training in that intersection. So let me share with you that more or less every 10 years, UNESCO brings together a global forum on education. And the purpose of that global forum on education is to bring ministers of education from all over the world, the member states, to set the agenda of education priorities over certain years, over a certain number of years. So the last education forum of UNESCO took place in May 2015 in Incheon in South Korea. And that education forum set what the UNESCO sees as the priority until 2030 for education worldwide and in terms of collaboration, international collaboration around education. And I wanted to emphasize or highlight two paragraphs that you may find in this Incheon Declaration and this plan of action that is articulated here. One is that, of course, they focus this current global education agenda on quality education. 20 years ago, the focus and the priority was in education for all, was to ensure access to education. But since 2015, the focus has been on how can we improve the quality of education. But education for sustainable development and global citizenship is also very much part of that agenda currently. But I want to highlight here the focus on values. As you can see in paragraph 63 of this declaration and document states the international community and UNESCO commits to seek ways to provide learners with opportunities to acquire throughout life the knowledge, skills, values, and attitudes that are needed to build peaceful, healthy, and sustainable development. And in paragraph 22 of the same document states that quality education includes because the whole document it emphasizes the importance to ensure more quality education for all. And therefore they say, what's quality education? And they state that quality education includes the development of those skills, values, attitudes, and knowledge that enable citizens to lead healthy and fulfilled lives, make informed decisions, and respond to local and global challenges. But throughout the document, they also emphasize the importance of education for sustainable development and education for global citizenship, and that takes place through a values and examination and clarification, that fundamentally education for sustainability, ESD, is fundamentally about values education. So the question could be, what are the values and principles of sustainability and global citizenship? Another thing that is very much part of the priority of the UNESCO agenda currently is to ensure that education for sustainable development is incorporated in all levels of learning. And ESD, Education for Sustainable Development, consists, according to UNESCO, in educating to generate social transformation with the objective to create more sustainable societies. And the goal of the work of UNESCO around ESD is to incorporate the values inherent to sustainability in all aspects of learning. So when the question comes of what are the values and principles of sustainability, we can find them articulated, not only the values and principles of sustainability, but also of global citizenship. We can see that or find them clearly articulated in the Earth Charter. And the Earth Charter is offered to many people to embrace it, embrace as institutions, individuals, or schools or universities as an ethical reference or as an ethical compass, an ethical reference or an ethical compass that can guide us towards a more just, sustainable, and peaceful world. It could serve as a map that identifies the way towards a more sustainable society. So in 2003 and 2019, UNESCO adopted 2 resolutions in relation to the Earth Charter. In these 2 resolutions, basically UNESCO emphasizes or agrees or adopts the idea that the understanding that they recognize the Earth Charter as an important educational instrument and as an ethical framework for sustainable development. And they recommend member states and institutions to use the Earth Charter as an educational instrument. So when we look at many documents and they emphasize, such as UN documents, the importance of incorporating the values and principles of sustainability in education, the question that could come to our mind is whether we are really cultivating a culture of care and respect for the large living world in the mainstream education, or are we nurturing implicitly or explicitly values of unsustainability through the education system? If we see the world as we are now currently living, with the current challenges of climate change, environmental degradation, conflict, and it's to a certain extent growing intolerance with the different ones, I think we could maybe question what has been the role of education systems and institutions in more or less being in a vacuum in terms of cultivating the values of care or a culture of peace or a culture of care and respect for the large living world. And therefore, I think education institutions have to take on that key protagonist role as main drivers of social transformation, key and protagonist role as key drivers towards sustainability. And therefore, the question comes how to incorporate values and principles of sustainability and global citizenship in processes of education and learning. And what are those ethical references? And therefore, I think that's where we, in the Earth Charter, the work we have been doing in terms of research and training, we have selected a number of resources that have been used widely in terms of how the Earth Charter can be used as an educational tool. So the first one I'm going to share with you here, and I will subsequently send to you the link in the chat box here, is a document that you can find just by Googling it, actually. It's called A Guide for Using the Earth Charter in Education. This document was launched in a UNESCO conference back in 2009, and it's translated in many languages and easily accessible and available in the internet. We have also produced and launched a document that it's basically a teacher's guide on educating for sustainable lifestyle with the Earth Charter. And it can easily be found also as an instrument. It was actually developed for Costa Rica primary schools. And there is one that is a guide for teachers, and another one is for a booklet for students. But basically this guidebook offers ideas of how to incorporate this notion of sustainability through the values and principles of the Earth Charter in classes of mathematics, social studies, science, language, and etc. Similarly, we also have developed a material called Bringing Sustainability into Classrooms. Is an Earth Charter, also an Earth Charter guidebook for teachers that is not limited to primary school teachers as the previous one, but it offers also general guidelines, ideas, and examples of how the Earth Charter can be used in education. Anyway, we have also selected a huge Earth Charter bibliography that can be found in our website, and numerous examples. I'll just mention two here, and a third one in the next slide. For instance, the Pictures of Success is actually a project that was developed in the UK, and you can easily access that also by just Googling picturesofsuccess.org. And what they did is basically they linked each Earth Charter principle to an image and to a story. And the purpose here was to show that values and principles education doesn't have to be abstract. It can actually be connected to real life stories, real examples of stories that could stimulate in the learner a reflection about a specific situation and experience and link it with the values of the Earth Charter. There is an Earth Charter board game. There are also some stories about this that you can find in YouTube or in our website. It's basically a board game to show that we can cultivate the values and principles of sustainability as articulated in the Earth Charter in a fun way, in a playful way, again, through the effort of sharing stories of real life. The last example I wanted to briefly share with you is this app called Mapping, and it's basically an app that you can easily, freely download, and any school or any school teacher can use to engage the students or the learners, young or teenagers, to learn more about the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, and the Earth Charter principles. But by engaging not only from a theoretical point of view, but if the schools commit to implement the values and principles of sustainability, as well as the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, this app can serve the teacher or the school when they open an account there to engage the students in implementing activities in each of the Sustainable Development Goals. So it serves as a sort of a social media to showcase what the school or the classroom is doing with regards to the SDGs. So this app is called MapTeam. So I am actually going to end by briefly sharing the key ideas that we can find in their charter. So the core, or at the heart of their charter, lies an ethic of care and respect for the community of life. So at the outset, the worldview that is articulated in their charter is a worldview that invites us to expand our sense of care and respect beyond ourselves, beyond our families, and beyond our nations and countries, to envision and to think that our sense of respect and care and responsibility has to do or to involve the large living world, beyond humans, and actually beyond humans that are beyond our own cultures, but also beyond humans in terms of involving the large living world, which is their charter calls the community of life. So each word that we can find in their charter was actually carefully thought and drafted through a process that took over 6 to 7 years with individuals and experts in all regions of the world and also different areas of knowledge. But the Earth Charter articulates 16 principles organized in 4 parts. The first one starts with this notion of respect and care for the community of life, which serves as the heart or the foundation of the rest of the Earth Charter. And it goes to Pillar 2, which articulates a number of values and principles under the notion of ecological integrity. Then Pillar 3 articulates values around or under the idea of social and economic justice. And it ends with a pillar on democracy, nonviolence, and peace. So it's important to emphasize here or highlight that their charter vision articulates a systemic approach, a systemic nature of all these challenges and aspirations of the human community. And therefore, each one of them is to see interdependent from one another. In our website, you can also find these little cards that can serve for any teacher, any school teacher, to stimulate dialogue with the students about what each value or each principle of their charter is all about. This is just to show you what you can find in Pillar 1, in Pillar 2 under ecological integrity, under Pillar 3 on social and economic justice. And again, each one of these icons is there, comes from actually an abstract vision, but to invite the learner to dialogue about the different views on the theory and practice, what the meaning behind each of these words, but also to envision how what happens when each one of these is practiced or is lived in a day-to-day life situation, but also what happens when there is a vacuum or when there is the opposite of these values and principles are existing in a given situation. So with this, I'm gonna express my gratitude for your time. I know I spoke a little bit longer and faster, but I wanted to give you an overview of their charter and basically present this to you as an instrument and as an invitation for any educator or any school. You are very much invited to embrace, adopt, and use it. And as I mentioned in our website and actually YouTube channel, you can also find a number of useful resources. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Miriam. And Brother Vargas has a very specific submission to you as how can Montfort institutions be part of this process, or how can they link with the Charter? There is a specific question that the Montfort institutions would like you to answer.
Well, I think as each school or the whole association of schools can express its commitment to use the Earth Charter. We call it a commitment or endorsement to the Earth Charter. And then you can start using it by incorporating it in your schools. Many schools have used it as an ethical reference to look at the school with a whole institutional approach. Whole institutional approach meaning how to incorporate these values and principles of sustainability and global citizenship that are articulated in the Earth Charter, but incorporate it in the curriculum, incorporate it through the pedagogical approach in the school operations, meaning the actual management of the school, but also in the relation that the school establishes with the community where the school is located. The UNESCO calls it a whole institutional approach to ESD, to Education for Sustainable Development. I will be more than happy to follow up with more details on how this can happen, and above all, to share some of the experiences of how some schools have fully embraced the Earth Charter.
Yes, okay. So actually, thank you so much for giving this these pointers, these specific pointers. But since we are talking about the emphasis now is more on values and an ethical compass. So when we are referring so so repeatedly towards an ethical compass, so that is something, although we are talking about the sustainability goals, what is the ethical compass, I think, comes from our own innate tuning in with nature. So that is if once we are tuned into nature and to nature's round, so to say, I think many things will fall in place. And because we are talking about an ethical compass, I just want to mention here that about 4 years ago, we did a little bit of thinking on this, and we wrote an essay titled "Towards an Ethics of Permanence." And I think, I think one should think through that kind of thinking to say, okay, sustainability, yes, but towards permanence is what I wanted to just mention. And
it sounds beautiful.
Yes, there's an essay towards an ethics of permanence, and you could take a look at that at some point.
Yes. Well, this sounds beautiful, and actually part of my own research interest has been on how we can make values-based education not sound as theoretical or abstract, but transformative. We have been looking at pedagogical elements to make it happen in a way that it's not just about conversation on concept and theories, but how to spark interest in the learner, but also how to enable the learner to go through a transformative learning experience. And actually, the use of arts in storytelling and metaphor is one of the key elements that we have found that it's very useful when we want to generate a transformative learning experience. And sometimes we think about the use of art only for the art classes, but here we have actually experienced the use of art as a way to engage the learner in deep thinking and in expressing not only thinking, but feelings through an artwork. And art has been really used largely. I have researched over 120 stories of good practices of uses of the Earthshot in education. And the use of art in storytelling and metaphors is certainly there. But you mentioned about nurturing the connection with nature. And it's one of the key elements too, because the reality is that our society has become quite disconnected from our inner essence and disconnected from nature, because there is a large part of our population now currently living in urban areas. And therefore, one of the key elements we have found is really making sure we help the learner connect with nature. Not only learn about science through the books in a cognitive way, but having this heart and mind connection through an experience with nature. And by doing that is kind of a way to, not only the only way, but a way to cultivate and nurture this deep sense of belonging, or this deep sense of care and awareness for the community of life, awareness for the large living world. I think the task here, or the challenge, is to help young people think about how we relate to one another. How are we relating to one another? How we ought to relate, but not in an imposing or vertical way of teaching, but in using questions and using inquiry for the learner to think about what's happening with our relationships with our own selves, what's happening with our relationship with other people, with people from other cultures, what's happening with our relationship with nature and this human nature connection. So it's also there as part of our findings in terms of key pedagogical elements.
Yes, thank you very much again, Miriam. And this is only the beginning, and I'm sure Montfort institutions will continue their engagement with you. Thank you once more. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Yes, I would like to invite Miriam Ridhima now, because Ridhima is a bit of has another commitment. Ridhima, could you please come in?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, yes.
Okay. So should I begin?
Yes, Ridhima, we can hear you.
Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Ridhima Pandey and I'm 13. So I'll just briefly talk about how I started, and just because today we all are here to mainly discuss about how schools can whether it's teachers or the whole community of schools, how can they help the kids, from my understanding, how we can help the kids to be more environmental conscious, or just to how we can teach them to be more sustainable. So I would just like to share how my whole journey has been, because I'm a student myself. So I mean, I guess with hearing what were my challenges, I guess it would be more easier for the teachers, and I guess for everyone to understand what are the basic needs that a child needs if they really want to be an activist, or just not just being an activist, but if they do want to do something. So I basically came to know about climate change and global warming after the 2013 Kedarnath flash flood. So when the flash flood occurred, I was at my house. My mom was watching the television, and I was just sitting next to her. I was kind of frustrated because she was watching the television like 24/7, and I didn't got the time to watch, my TV, the cartoons and stuff like that. So I was a little frustrated, but I didn't really had any other option because she was very, determined to watch what was happening, and my dad also went there to rescue the animals. So I just sat next to her and was just like, curious of what is happening that she's so into it. So when I sat next to her, I still remember seeing the visuals of, that whole destruction, destroyed building, everything was destroyed, and seeing the level of Ganga so high, and seeing people crying, and I saw not only this television, but the videos and pictures that my dad brought of people crying that they've lost their family members, kids, trying to find out their parents, trying to find their houses, trying to find their belongings and stuff like that. And when I saw those things, it was, it sometimes made me sad, but more than being sad, I was scared because I have never seen destruction like that in my life before, not even till today, I can say. So, I mean, after seeing that destruction, I asked my mom what has happened. And she was like, okay, it's a flash flood, and, this happened because of these reasons. And when I heard the reasons, from that point of time, even since till today, I am really scared of, flash floods, droughts, and, especially landslides, and when it thunders enough, raining, especially at the night. I'm like really scared. I used to get these nightmares that I died because of a flash flood, or I lost my parents, or I lost my house, and I can't really do much. So I was like struggling a lot at that point of time. And that was the moment when I realized that I really want to do something. I want to do something to stop flash floods. So I didn't knew it's a natural phenomena. I can't do much to stop it and stuff like that. The only thing that I had in my mind was I don't want to die because of a flash flood, or I don't want to lose my parents or my family because of that. So after that, I asked my mom what was the reason behind that flash flood, and she was like, then she told me about what climate change is, what global warming is, and I just found it interesting because when she told me of that global warming is happening because of our human emissions, I was like, for me at that time, I was like 5 or 6, so only cars used to emit for me at that time. So I was like, how can us driving car, change the temperature of such a big earth, and even if the temperature is increasing, how can it be bad for us? So I was like really confused. I was scared of dying. I was confused. I was intrigued by, this whole stuff, and I wanted to learn more. And as I started learning, I learned about child rights, about, living a sustainable life, about, how things are going on in an unsustainable way just for the development, just for the sake of development. And it gradually made me frustrated, more and more angry and more or less, sad in a way that our future has been destroyed for for luxury, for money, for profit, and for in the name of development, which people seems to be adoring, because that's why you know things are going on so bad around us. So that sort of was the main reason, I can say, I came into it. And yeah, since 2017, I filed my first petition against the government of India. Then in 2019, I joined 15 other child petitioners to file a complaint at United Nations and the Child Rights Committee, with which I have my today's meeting at 10:30, sadly. So yeah, I mean, then we filed that lawsuit. And yeah, after that, gradually I started working, and recently this August, like just few months back, I had a private audience with His Holiness Pope Francis, which was an eye opener for me and was a great experience, I can say, in a way. Because I feel when we talk about because right now we're talking about ethics, values, nature, conservation, and if we don't talk about, His Holiness Pope Francis, and about, his book that he wrote, the encyclical, the Laudato Si, it's not going to be just disabled. So, I mean, I do still do have this book with me. So I can say that, when it comes to talking about ethics, it's really important for the kids or for everyone in general to know about how things are going on around them, and how things were back then, because earlier I feel like back then, our ancestors used to live a much more sustainable life, even though it was not intended, that, okay, we are dying, we have to live a sustainable life. But it was more or less, their, I can say, you know, they knew what was right. And somewhere, they were so connected to the environment and to the nature. I guess it was a very practical thing, that they used, those stainless steels and stuff like that, not kind of stuff that we use these days that often. So yeah, I mean, it's really important. At the same time, the easiest things that is important for kids, because when I was learning, I didn't have the resources. I was struggling to get the resources. I didn't know whom to reach out to learn more, and I was confused. I used to go to my teachers regarding that I want to learn about climate change, and they were like, okay, first focus on your studies, first complete your notebooks and stuff like that. First, just just focus on your studies right now. Just read your books and focus on your exams and studies, read about these things at your home and stuff like that. So I mean, it was a real struggle to learn about climate change on my own, because I was a kid back then. I didn't know, what could be the reliable resources to read upon, and whom I can reach out to, how I can read it, how I can inculcate it. So it's really important, for the students to get these things from the school in a way, because we're going to the schools to at the very end learn the importance, the important things, not only just get educated and earn money, in the future, but also to get educated about, everything around us. And environment is the thing because of which we are sustaining on this planet. So I guess it's really important to inculcate those things amongst the students. And yeah, I mean, it's really important at the same time to change that monotonous way of teaching, that old way, which kind of becomes boring at the same time. And as of what Marian as well said, that it's really important to connect to nature. I totally agree with that, because when I read a thing, I don't get, it's not very intriguing and interesting, okay, I'm reading a book, it's very interesting and stuff like that. But once I go to the nature and see it, and then if you tell me the same thing in the book, I would be more interested. I would, remember that throughout my lifetime because I saw it. But reading is sort of is a thing which won't intrigue every single child out there. So I believe it's really important for the schools to give this exposure to the kids to connect with in nature. It could be, maybe taking them to a field trip, or, even, showing them the videos could affect in many ways. And yeah, at the same time, I would just say that, just give and, maybe help the kids to find out, it's really important. I believe that, schools can play a really important part in it, in, sort of helping kids and, helping them to find their superpowers in a way, and, helping them to use that. Because at the very end, it is, their superpower, because at the very end, they are going to be the one, most impacted. We are going to be the most impacted ones in the coming years. So just telling them that, this is how you've been impacted, and, this whole big Fridays for Future movement that's been going on, supporting the kids out there. And yeah, I mean, supporting them to understand what's been happening and helping them with the resources is, I can say, could be the easiest things to do for the schools, as of what comes to the very beginning point for the students to learn of. And yeah, that's it from my side.
Thank you so much, Ridhima, for this, this journey down your own personal life and how you were sensitized and sensitive enough to go deeper and inquire. But what if, I just want to connect here with your struggle to find the right, resources and the people to go to, where and that indicates, how compartmentalized our education system is, or our schooling system is. Because I know for one thing that Uttarakhand is where a lot of work on climate change has happened, and where education is concerned itself, there have been people who have been doing a lot of work, both in the hills and the plains of Uttarakhand, to connect children and connect education with with the lived reality that they face. So, this probably is a pointer for the Montfortian institutions that, I think it is time for us to move out of compartmentalization of our own set protocols and set agendas for ourselves and look beyond. So thank you, Ridhima, and if you're around, we will, later on probably take questions. And I would like Prasad to come in, please. Prasad?
Yeah, can you hear me, Naila?
Yes, Prasad.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. To all the participants who are a part of this conference, and I thank for giving this opportunity to share my points and my views towards sustainable living, especially from an individual perspective. What a person can really do at his at an individual level. So before I'm audible first right now. Just want to know.
Yes.
Okay, fine, great. So before I just want to get into the some technical part of this session, I just want to share my story that how it started. Basically, I born and brought up in a family where my parents used to get into service oriented, like getting into the villages and doing medical camps and doing plantation programs. And there was a first initiative which started in me from the family point of view, with getting involved in these type of activities. And I was interested on plantations. Obviously, most of the young kids at the time, they feel planting something is something interesting for them. So I was also into that, and I had a knowledge to some extent at that time. It was long back, almost 25 years back. So where usage of plastic was another issue, which was it was starting at that time, and I felt that not to using a plastic it started. I could able to understand the damage the plastic does to the environment. So these were the two basic informations which I had, but apart from that, nothing into my mind. And there's no information about climate change, no sustainability, nothing. It's a zero knowledge about these things. And obviously, as a parents and as a student, when we go, especially in Telangana and Andhra, there is a way where the education, there's a very hard line which has been defined that once you are done with your plus two, or 10th class, then you either need to go to the engineering stream or the medical stream. So these are the only ways we have to get into that. And fortunately, I couldn't able to get through the medical entrance, but I was opted biological sciences, because the science made me very interesting, because I keep on observing the nature in and around. And I tried a couple of times with the medical entrance, but fortunately I couldn't able to get into that, frankly speaking now, because then I been to the horticulture sciences, and I finished my graduation from Engineering University. And thereafter started my career into the landscape part as one of the part of my career. And still the environmental thing was in my mind, that is there any opportunity? Obviously, through my career, there is an opportunity where I could give a designs to my clients with making more greenery and more lush green spaces wherever there is a possibility. And during my career, I happened to see one of the information published in the Hindu paper, that a climate change conference by a youth. And this may be a very interesting point. What is climate change? I've been hearing about the global warming, but beyond that, there's a climate change, which is something very, very interesting. And where I was looking at a platform and this platform, it's an Indian Youth Climate Network, which organized this conference, getting almost 180 young people in Hyderabad, and made them to sit for 3 days conference. And yes, still it was only plantations and plastic. Beyond that, I couldn't able to. And the 3 days, it was continuous, where the people were talking about biodiversity, somebody talking about water, somebody talking about energy, somebody talking about ecological crisis, waste management. There's so many other topics are running in and around, but still it's only plantation and plastic. And I kept on engaging myself with the organization, and it gave me a great opportunity to explore myself, to learn from to learn on the issues beyond the plantations and plastic. And in the due course, I've been engaged with one of the important part aspect of the environment education, especially people. Most of the people are not aware about this. Is what carbon footprint calculator. I've been to.
Please unmute your microphone.
I've been under his. Interning with him, and started understanding about carbon footprint calculator, and I happened to calculate my calculation. Then I understood, because all the time we have been talking most of the times in an abstract way, because we have to do this, we have to do that, we have to stop this, we have to stop that, and we should not use this and that and all those things. And there's a lot of things that are damaging, and everyone has to take collective actions. That's fine. But the moment I started understanding the numbering, because this is something very important. The moment a person starts calculating a number in terms of carbon emissions, then the whole things get changed. I was shocked the moment I've been calculating my power consumption, how much I am emitting, the transportation, how much I am emitting, the food, the consumer durables, the waste I generate, the type of house I live, and everything. And everything is giving a number. And this is making me a bit guilt and embarrassing. The moment, in a span of 3 to 4 months, I felt that my lifestyle and the way which I'm living, the connection with my nature is completely against, because the system which I am within the society and the economics which is driving me is making me unsustainable. The first step I took was sold the car, because that's the first step. I felt earlier I felt that having a luxurious life, having a big building, having a cars, having a money, having a balance bank, these were the dreams in my life before I got into this carbon footprint calculation. But thereafter, once I started understanding and calculating and coming with a number, then the whole scenario has changed. There I started making myself sustainable. I've been driving towards sustainable living. And here I could able to understand, because every human and every organism, in fact, needs an energy and a material. But the amount of energy, the extraction of energy is very limited to the other species, unlike the human, where because we are a moving desire machines. Our always minds run with the desires, and we keep on filling that vacuums and go for continuous flow of desires, where we try to extract the energy and the materials. And here the important point which I understood is, we also need to understand the energy calculations. One, where how much energy I am extracting from the nature, and I am also understanding the calculations of how much carbon is getting into the atmosphere, because it is very directly related to the climate change, the global warming and the climate change. So this two areas which really made me to understand clearly that the way, just now Marian was talking about the ethical compass, which is a wonderful way she has presented. Now I felt that I'm going towards a sustainable living ethical compass, and my directions has been changed. And as I've been working with the Indian Youth Climate Network, it's a youth-based organization where a lot of young people were coming and understanding. I mean, there were people coming for the sake of certificates. There were people coming for the sake of to make a career. There are people who really want to put their energy and time into towards the nature. The very group of people have been interacting. but there are people who got influenced with my actions, because that has also, and this, what happens when you start doing these activities, the first it starts from the home. Like, what am I doing like this? I mean, why I'm selling the car and all those things? Because obviously the families are very much influenced by the surrounding people and the community. But I started making my parents to know better and better understanding that what exactly is sustainable living, and that acceptance has really gave me a opportunity for me to explore and learn more from my home. And of course there will be a lot of resistance. Of course there will be a lot of peer groups and friends who might do a mockery and make fun of us, even if we go on a cycle, or if we go on in a public transport. Because I usually face this one problem, which whenever I go to a functions, because when you see functions, you could able to see a lot of cars, and especially cars, and they started comparing this. I felt that this comparison business, first, once we start keeping aside and putting ourselves and connecting with the nature by calculating our number, what exactly the number which defines our living style. If you start putting that, it makes you a more stressless life. It reduces, because you don't need more materials from the earth to extract and to spend. Because what we are doing, we are extracting at one end, we are extracting the resources from the nature, we are consuming at one point, and again we are dumping into the atmosphere, to the nature. The type of materials which, I'm not saying that we should be completely coming out of the living with the current society, but we have to set up ourselves as an example to the society that there is an other way of living also, not the one which is highly unsustainable, but also a sustainable living. There are a lot of changes which can be done at home. I personally feel that the power is one where we can do, because there is also another way to do, is like we can do a home audit of our family, because we can calculate our individual personal calculator. One, we have a very comprehensive calculator, which if Montfort wants, then we can train them in a detailed, comprehensive way. One, we can do a home audit. We can also do an energy calculator, and based on that, we can let the materials what we can let into our home, not the one which unnecessarily, which have a high carbon, which is completely ecologically unfriendly to the nature, not only the nature but also at home. Because we think that whatever the materials which we are getting are all environmental friendly, are not harming us, but definitely it has its own impact on our lives. And we could see clearly that through food we are getting the people are exposed to cancer and other health issues in recent past. So my point over here is like the energy calculation is something very important for every individual and every family, and also every institution. It may be a education institute, or it may be an organization, because most of the time our time as a student, if I talk about a student or a teacher, if you could be able to take it at an institution level, his time is spent mostly at home or at the school, right? So these are the two areas. If you could able to start making the changes and see the change, then gradually it has a ripple effect over within the family and also within the school, right? So I personally feel that the energy calculator is one where every student has to learn. He has to know. Every student has to have an understanding. Not only student, but also the teachers has to have an understanding on the comprehensive carbon footprint calculator. Based on that, and also do a energy audit, not only for the education institute or wherever the students or the teachers are spending their time, but also their home. And this gives a picture for them. From here they can start having a policy. For an individual policy, people don't understand individual policy. It's individual policy is something where you are committed to yourself, because you are convicted to yourself, saying that not to use this. I want to use for a public transport. Yes, I want to reduce my power consumption. I want to go for an organic food or a less chemical food, or else I want to use such materials or consumer durables which are easily recyclable. So this is an individual way. In the same way, we have to replicate the same thing to the family as an institution, because usually what happens, the people think that in a big picture of environment, my individual action, does it make any difference? This is the question we keep on asking ourselves. There's so many people are. Leave about others. Just question yourself. How much you are consuming, how much I'm consuming, how much my impact on the environment. Let me calculate, let me understand it, let me change myself. Then have spread this to family. Then again, gradually it goes to the friends, like-minded friends. I mean, the more you have like-minded friends with a sustainable living, it will have a more greater impact in and around areas. Then gradually you can go for this audits, the plan, which was talking about the policy, which can be framed at the individual level, at a family level, at an institution, maybe a school, or it may be a college, or it may be an organization. If you are very much particular about these things, it will have a greater impact. No, and these small collective actions is going to bring a massive change. And I personally feel that individual actions also have a greater impact in the society, especially in conserving the nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Prasad, for this very, very, very inspiring and to the point presentation. I think institutions will be able to connect with this very well, because what they would like to do probably, there's also a request that will you be able to help them to do their carbon calculations and help to move towards zero emitting institutions. So that is something I'm sure Prasad will be able to do. But what I found interesting is I can relate this very much to institutions, because institutions come out with report cards for children. Okay. And he says that, calculating these things, gives you a report card. It first makes you guilty and embarrassed. I think all of us need to be feeling guilty and embarrassed, and only then from there we will move towards, taking action. So Prasad, stay with us while we take Usha, and then we can collectively have a discussion or respond to questions. Could we please have you come in? Usha? Yes. Yes, Usha. Good morning and welcome.
Thank you. Actually, by and large, I've been doing farming and I'm not very used to making presentations. I was a bit worried that I'll ramble off, so I wrote down some. I'll start with that and then add on. So, yeah, I feel we have all grown up in times when there appears to be great abundance. We have grown up with this feeling that there is plenty more where it comes from, be it water, be it gas for fuel, be it petrol for transport. And we have, without any need to discriminate about how appropriate it is, or even to think whether there is more to all this, we have expanded our needs endlessly. Even the most poor and frugal, for sheer existence in this culture, consume a lot more than our forefathers did 2-3 generations ago. We have to bear in mind that our very mind that is going to think and be the basis from which our action springs is rooted in this roller coaster destructive culture. We are very used to getting many things at the flick of a switch, at the turn of a key, at the pressing of a button. Our needs, physical, emotional, social, are extremely scattered. We are rarely with what is immediately around us. Most of our relating is with people far off. We need things to be transported from far off for our daily needs. We don't even think if we really need it and whether it is good for us. We don't know how these things come to us. We don't know that the electricity we use may be coming to us at the cost of great tragedy of displacement to a great many people. We don't think of what is happening to the entire farming community that provides us our daily food. We don't speak the language of those people with whom we share this earth, by whose efforts we are sustained. We don't connect with with them at all. So we have been schooled to alienate ourselves from our families, from our communities, from our land, and what for? To be caught in a narrow economic trap and slave for a section of our society that has laid out this path of destruction. We have foregone our space for responsible action in lieu of the salaried job that consumes our life, our space to live and function as part of caring communities and sharing communities. So in this context, I feel like sharing one thing which often occurred to me. One is that we often see ourselves in selfies these days. So it shows one person without any connections behind. And if we compare it to, say, someone who is living very ecologically, as depicted in, say, a Varley drawing. So in a Varley drawing, there are so many people, there are so many animals and birds, and so many activities are going on, and yet there is so much more space to accommodate a lot more. So, and in that, if you see, there is no individual being highlighted. So each person is happy to be part of this collective living and to keep it going. So I think when in schools we are preparing children, it's important to see how we are building them as individuals existing for themselves, or whether we are building them as people who feel part of a larger community which is caring for things around them. I would like to share something that Dr. Venkat said. If we humans do have a destiny, a natural destiny, it is to sustain life on this planet. If this be so, then our need is a renaissance in agriculture through nursing a robust peasantry, which will restore the losses of quality and health of our soils, the health of our plants and animals, and the health of humans and all other non-human forms of life. The health of all this is a single connected chain. Loss of a single link will result in the loss of the chain itself. I just thought that this made a good starting point. Health of soils is the foundation for health of all forms of life. If this is central to our planning for livelihoods and human resources, the way we train our children to do what they are going to be do. Then what are its implications? It is needed that most people live a community-based grounded existence. This means we reject jobs provided by someone far off and refuse to be drawn to an alienated existence. Wherever we exist, we do so deeply connected to the people around and to the natural resources of air, water, soil fertility, biodiversity, and community of people rich in skills and capacities of maintaining, building, using, nurturing, and living by their set of natural resources. Community of people connected by and with all these. Our first job is then to collectively tend and nurture our people and our natural resources. We would need to work out what our unit would be. In rural areas, a watershed makes a good connected unit. In a city, we would have to work it out. A ward maybe can be worked out as a primary functioning unit. Each and every person who is the least bit serious about this has to ground oneself, roots oneself in a community. This is needed to gather strength, capacity, understanding, and to position ourselves to address the converging crisis of failing politics, depletion of mineral resources, alarming state of our natural resources, depleted and poisoned soils that would need to be nursed back, and dangerously receding water tables. It is very easily possible to address all these and bring it back to a state of abundance if we organize ourselves to do so. Now, for this, we would need to start a process of community self-education, including ourselves. And in this context, I feel that schools should become the hub for transition. In fact, this transition town movement started with a permaculture teacher in a small town school in Ireland, where he set a project for the children saying that, say, in another 20 years, there are going to be no fossil fuels. Then how will we organize all our needs in this town? And how will we move to a situation where we live without using of fossil fuels? Apparently, when they present, it was a small town and this project was presented to the mayor, and he found it so good that he adopted it. So the whole town moved towards meeting all their needs with their own resources so that they could be sustainable. So now for this kind of thing, I think the whole nature of the school will have to change. Most of the school's activities should be devoted to transition. Schools should be entirely neighborhood schools with a great degree of integration between school and community. In the initial phase, the school will have a series of local surveys about the status of resources, whether it is water, air in the area, and the soil in the area, where the food is coming from, quality of food, how the soils are, and what the human resources are doing. So when we do a series of surveys like this, we will really come into touch with the reality of our own existence and how we are contributing to sustainability or we are working for destruction. So when we get to do that, we'll be able to reflect and then design a set of activities for ourselves. And I feel that once the school does this survey, this thing needs to be shared with the community. So it would be very nice if we bring out a regular newsletter where we are presenting this information, which is collected along with the participation of local people and which is again being shared by them, so that there is a collective energy and understanding being built up about what is happening around all of us and what we are doing and not doing or what should be done. And I think many things will emerge from that. So when this initial phase of surveys is done and it is presented in a directly to people and also written as part of a newsletter, this would make for the initial phase of transition work. And done well, it should lead to a series of activities and many groups working on different aspects. Unlike existing curriculum where knowledge generated somewhere far is studied out of academic requirements and interest and no entailing action, when school is a transition hub, knowledge about our community and its resources, situations and problems and strengths becomes important and would naturally flow into action. Instead of knowledge for individual achievement, it would be for exercising our capacities and building them for collective well-being. Teacher and children would actually be learning together and learning things which are significant for their life. School and community would be deeply connected. School as a hub for transition would have to be a neighborhood school totally covering a neighborhood population. We will find that our space for actively responsibly has been cut by centralized structures. We would need to create the ground to have space for functioning responsibly. We will find that our problems are collective ones and can be solved only collectively. We will find that individually cornering resources is destructive and pointless and a waste of energy. We would find that we need to move towards local production and local consumption. We will find that we need all our labor for working to take care of our collective resources and for taking care of our people, and cannot have the time and mind for doing alienated jobs. We will find that life would feel good, very secure, very light, very enjoyable, very meaningful when we function as part of commons at nurturing and cherishing commons. In taking care of everything and everybody, we also get taken care of. And that is the best way to take care of ourselves as well. A wholly new way of living, a genuine living where our lives are not consumed by paid jobs will emerge. This is what I feel. That's it.
Usha, this is so wonderful and so insightful, and I would I would make a submission here that if you can please share your notes with the Montfort Institute. If you can, make a photocopy of your presentation and mark a copy to them. And if all of us, think very, very deeply into all the insightful pointers that Usha has already given us. And if we come back after a year to take, take cognizance and, of where we stand, I think slowly, very, very systematically, Montfort institutions will be able to go to what they have, proposed as towards total sustainability. It's a big challenge if you say total sustainability, and one can one can see how to do it. But I feel that there is plenty to do here, and Usha has given us almost like a roadmap of how to go about it. And Prasad is there, of course, to give us these certificates to say find the number. Where is once you get the number, you know where you're going. And of course, Miriam with this global worldview and her wide experience would be there for Montfort institutions to take their vision forward, and would I don't see too many questions coming into the question box, but Miriam, could you respond to what Usha has articulated in terms of a roadmap for Montfort institutions, and how do you see it from your global perspective? And also, if you can respond to what Prasad had said, that would be very nice.
So sorry, I'm going to answer very briefly because I'm almost falling asleep.
Yes.
I'm sorry. It's 11:30 here. I think we are living currently a paradigm shift in education. The good news about this is that the international policies from UNESCO is strongly pushing the paradigm shift. It's strongly pushing the need to reorient education to a more participatory, transformative, flexible, transdisciplinary way. Moving away from a traditional fragmented way of teaching to a more interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary way. So it's all there in terms of UNESCO pushing policies in this agenda, this paradigm shift in education. So I think it's an opportunity. At least in the agenda of education for sustainable development, there is a strong emphasis on the importance to make sure quality education and education for sustainable development is undertaken with providing a space for critical thinking, system thinking, values-based education. So what I'm saying is that we are currently living this paradigm shift that I think I have heard some of the previous speakers say. So the opportunity is great because we just have to take this wave and go with it, right? UNESCO is pushing and encouraging member states to develop policies towards this new paradigm shift. So it's there. And actually just next month, UNESCO is going to launch a new Futures of Education report that I'm sure it includes all of these great ideas in terms of emphasis in contents that are related to sustainability, values, global citizenship, but also emphasis in a new pedagogical approach, one that is more contextual and etc. So I think I heard the previous speakers mention this, and I'm just linking it to what I know UNESCO says and highlights, and is trying to push. The reality is that it's a challenge because teachers are not educated or have not learned to provide or to engage into education through this new pedagogical or paradigm way. We all learned how to that education in a school is transmissive, it's vertical, and etc. However, at least in theory and in UNESCO policies, pushing us to make it in a different way. Because the reality is that most learners have access to information through Google. 100 years ago, schools and universities had a different role. What a lot was to provide information, but a lot of information can easily be found now. So I think the role of the school and universities have changed significantly over the past 20 years. And it's really to provide more of an experience of interaction, stimulating thought, stimulating critical thinking. And it's really enabling the learner to have the skills and the values to contribute with social transformation, to contribute with the betterment of society. And I think the previous speakers I heard mention this. Now we know there is a huge challenge, which is how we address climate change. So the schools cannot ignore that, right? And there is a huge push for climate literacy, because as I was, someone here said, I think it was Prasad, that the reality is that there is a huge illiteracy. We are all illiterate, environment and ecological illiterate, and climate illiterate. We may have a lot of PhDs or MBAs, but many MBAs are climate illiterate. Many well-educated people from a very formal and conventional way of education are ecological illiterate, despite many achievements in education. So this is an issue for the current world we have. And I think the current education system needs to really take the pulse and question our assumptions in terms of education and how education experience is all about, and look at the current context and challenges humanity face, and use these occasions in mathematics, language, social science, history, to incorporate in a cross-cutting way. It's not to create a new subject, is to incorporate these issues and challenges of sustainability, climate change, in a cross-cutting way in all subjects, but not only from a theoretical approach, but through an experiential learning way. And well, anyway, that's my humble comment at this point before I fall asleep.
Yes, Prasad?
As Marina said, it's true that the education, there's a transition has to happen, and it's happening, it's in progress. Definitely the transboundary and transdisciplinary approach is very much needed. And there are some programs which has been recent past, which were designed, it's called as DAY-3, where we engage the mathematics subjects, the social science, the English languages and everything towards the climate change. If I could able to take one simple example, if I take the mathematics, I could able to bring the biodiversity into this part and try to calculate the tree height, or I could able to connect with the tree, mensuration part, or any length and breadth, and whatever the topics which can be integrated towards this. And we can also do certain other areas where we could able to calculate the biodiversity, the number of species, which through their observation, what they could able to find in and around their campus, or in their in and around their vicinity. And this is how it has to be done, because as we cannot take something very separate subject, but we have to infuse the whole concept of climate change and ecological crisis into the regular subjects and make them aware. Maybe somebody who is interested in playing with the words and come with the poems and put the language into this, and somebody could able to talk about the policies, the negotiations, or something into the social sciences. So it would be very interesting to bring. And definitely I agree with Marian saying that 99% of the people are climate illiterate, like they are a certified climate illiterate. They are certified in their professions, but definitely illiterate in terms of climate and environment education.
Yes, wonderfully put, Prasad and Mirgan. Actually, I think
May I just say one thing?
yes,
In
Mirgan.
the materials I shared with you, and I'm actually going to share my presentation here. And in the presentation, you see some links to these guides for using the Earth Charter in education. There are some specific examples, as Prasad said. In mathematics, there are certain examples and some activities you can use, and in science and in language. So you can certainly make use of it and adapt it, of course, to your context. I'm afraid I think I'm gonna leave,
Yes,
and,
yes, Mirgan.
if
Thank
you
you so
excuse
much.
me,
Yes, thank you
I
so much.
appreciate
Yes,
and blessings.
yes.
And just one more point, Naila,
Yes,
here,
yes.
which the games and activities also plays a very significant role, because not making students to sit in the class always and make them to move in and around and engage them through games and activities really brings such a wonderful engagement, and they take those things very quickly. Unlike more textual bombarding the information from the passive way into their minds, and make them practically involved in one way or other way really brings a brilliant outcomes. Thank you, Marian, for your presentation. It's amazing, and I could able to connect the ethical compass with my lifestyle. It's a very interesting point which you have put there. Thank you.
Yes, so there is a comment here from Saiju P. Michael, which says we need to convert our campuses and properties to plastic-free and fully organic campuses. So this is, I think, a very wonderful comment and a way forward. And how do we eliminate the absolute non-essentials from our campuses? And by very by beginning to define what is essential and non-essential within our campus, and how do we create them in green organic campuses, something that we can connect with and work towards. And one of the one of the things that I would like to share with you here is in Uttarakhand, where Nidhi comes from. They have tried to do this about 20 years ago, and they came up with proper curriculum for children, and it was also adapted and adopted by the government of Uttarakhand. But what happens is that like everything else, India unfortunately tends to politicize everything. So I think it is time for institutions to take cognizance of what is relevant and try and see how we can still go ahead with these kinds of transformation. There are 2 or 3 very important points that are coming across here, which is the schools as transition hubs. And our institutions as free of plastic. When plastic is just a metaphor for everything. It stands for everything that is non-essential, that is energy energy intensive and things like that. And what Usha has almost like given us a roadmap of creating. She's given us a wonderful idea of schools as transition hubs. If one can go ahead with and begin there, I think we have a good start. And with this, I would like to, I think we are almost, we've overshot by about 7 minutes. I would like to hand over the proceedings to the Montfort institutions and the Master of Ceremonies for this session. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Naila, for chairing the panel session.